Welcome to the ABS Beef Reproductive webinar. This is the first one we've done. We hope you enjoy it. My name's Bill Cornell. Thanks for joining us tonight, or today in some cases for you. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Cliff Lamb. Cliff has been well known to many of us Australians, having done 3 seminars here in Australia for ABS. Cliff is the Professor and Head of the Department of Animal Science, College of Agriculture at the Texas A&M University. Cliff is always stimulating and provides us with better ideas on the way to increase our bottom line and our profit in our cattle operations. Good morning, Cliff. It's 3 a.m. No, 3:30 a.m. Welcome.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, it's good to be here, and good to have an opportunity to present to everybody. So, you know, it's been 3 years since I have been to Australia to talk, and so I'm excited to have an opportunity to get a chance to speak to everybody again today and talk about reproductive technologies. And you know, everybody's had a big struggle with COVID over the past year. But, you know, I was just talking to Bill and Fletch and everybody just before we got started, and it's amazing how it appears that for us in the US that we're starting to open up again, and we're excited about that because it gives everyone a chance to actually meet face to face again, and it would be nice for me to have been able to do that this time. But you know, being able to present by webinar is also an opportunity here, and hopefully it works well. I do encourage anybody while I'm talking, if you have questions, to make sure you put your questions into the chat, and I will address those at the end of my seminar. So when it comes to talking about reproduction in cattle and what is the best reproductive benchmark for a beef cattle operation, what I often find when I'm speaking to beef cattle producers around the country is they seem to get really hung up on getting the best pregnancy rates to artificial insemination. And while that's a really important point, very often what we do with estrus synchronization and artificial insemination is we get a chance to stimulate cattle to bunch up the calving season. And when we look at farm business operation management software and look at what is the most important reproductive benchmark, it isn't the pregnancy rates to artificial insemination or pregnancy rates over a period of time. Really, the most important reproductive benchmark is the percentage of cows that calve early in the calving season. So it's how many cows do you have calving right at the beginning of the calving season, say within that first 30 days of the calving season. That is the most important benchmark. And if there's anything that I say in my presentation today that I hope that you take away from, it isn't necessarily getting hung up on, do I get the best pregnancy rates for a set of AI cows or whatever that might be, but it's really taking a look over time at the percentage of cows that you get to calve right at the beginning of the calving season. And so before I really get stuck into the presentation, what I wanted to do is to share with you what it takes for us to get a pregnancy and a live calf at the end, and what are some realistic expectations. And so I show this slide here just to demonstrate what it takes for a cow to become pregnant. So if you take a look at the first row there, at day 0, which would be when a cow comes into heat or an estrus. Around that period of time, she's receptive to a bull or to artificial insemination. And so when that cow is mated, she will ovulate and have a fertilized egg about 24 to 30 hours after she actually first starts showing a heat. And when we put semen into a cow or a bull mates a cow, about 95% of those ovulations result in a fertilized embryo. So at that point, we're fairly certain in cows that are cycling and will show a heat, we're certain that about 95 to 100% of those inseminations or matings by a bull result in a fertilized embryo. But the reason that we don't get 95 to 100% of the cows pregnant is we have a lot of attrition from that point until the cow actually goes to calve. So when you take a look at this table, during that first week or so of the pregnancy, we lose about 20 to 25% of our pregnancies. And we lose those pregnancies for good reasons, right? So we lose those pregnancies because the mating, the semen and the egg is when they fertilized, there might have been an incompatibility in terms of genetics. The embryo might not be developing correctly. So we actually want those embryos to die. And there are a lot of other reasons too, but we do get quite a lot of attrition through those first 7 to 8 days. And then another critical period of time is that period of time at about 2 weeks after the cow was in heat. This is the period of time where an embryo must signal to the cow that the cow is pregnant. And so if there is some failure in that communication to signal to the cow that she is pregnant, so the embryo is telling the cow she's pregnant, the cow then, if there's a failure in that, then the cow will come back into heat and she will expel the embryo. And so we lose about another 5 to 10% of our pregnancies at that point. And then at around day 25, you'll see that the embryo then has to attach to the uterus and so on. And there's some failure there. And then once the embryo becomes a fetus, which is around day 42 to 44 days of pregnancy, there's a lot more stability. The embryo starts to survive on its own, and we have very little embryonic loss from that point. And so by birth, we'll generally, for cycling cows, so if the cows are cycling, every cow was cycling when we inseminated the cow, we'll end up with about 55 to 70% of our cows that end up having a calf at birth. And so people say, well, I'd like to get better than 70%. Sometimes that just simply is not realistic. There are a few things that I'll talk about today that will allow us to be sure that we end up that we can end up with a slightly better pregnancy rate. But the realistic pregnancy rate, if all of the cows are cycling when you artificially inseminate them, is somewhere between 55 and 70% of those cows are going to calve to that mating. The big difference, though, is that, well, the first thing I want to say here is it's amazing to me that everything that an embryo has to do actually results in 55. More than half of our inseminations end up in a live calf, considering everything that an embryo has to do to survive to get to this point. Now, that 55 to 70% is about as good as you will find in any mammalian species that gives birth to a single offspring like cows do. It is at least double what we find in humans, and it's still better than what happens in litter-bearing species like pigs or any of those other species. The survival rates of these embryos is very, very good. The problem that we have in cattle is because cattle generally only give birth to one offspring. Those embryos, we tend to notice this a lot more. When a pig gives birth to, say, 15 piglets, it may have started out with 30 piglets, but many of them died, and they result in about 15 overall. And so the attrition rate in cattle is not bad at all, but we notice it more. The other question I often get is, what's the difference between AI and natural service? Well, if you're utilizing semen that's collected from a reputable company, something like ABS would be doing, and you have a technician that knows how to artificially inseminate, generally the pregnancy rates or fertilization rates between artificial insemination and a bull mating that cow are almost identical. It's usually somewhere in that 55 to 70% that will ultimately result in a live calf. Now, the difference that we have, and this is where we don't compare apples to apples when we use artificial insemination or when we use natural service, is when we use artificial insemination, we're very often utilizing synchronization. And we tend to be able to synchronize animals so that we can artificially inseminate them all on the very first day of the breeding season. The great thing about synchronization is it stimulates non-cycling cows to start to cycle. But overall, we end up inseminating some cows that may not have been cycling right at the beginning of the breeding season. So we put semen in those cows and we give them a chance to become pregnant. But at the same time, the pregnancy rates in those cows might be a little bit lower. A bull, on the other hand, will never mate a cow that may not have been cycling. So that cow never gets a chance to become pregnant. However, in the cases in which that bull mates a cow that is cycling, the pregnancy rates will be fairly high. And so don't ever compare pregnancy rates of a bull mating cows versus a synchronization and AI program, because they'll never be the same, because you're not comparing apples to apples when we use estrus synchronization. So what are some of the factors that affect embryo mortality? Well, there's several factors, and I talked about genetic factors. I mean, sometimes it's just not the compatibility in that specific cow when the fertilization occurred. Heat or cold stress cause embryonic loss, and very often the heat stress actually has a negative impact on the oocyte or the unfertilized egg before it gets ovulated. And when it is ovulated, it just simply isn't able to continue to develop after fertilization. I talked very briefly about this asynchrony between the embryo and the maternal environment. So if the embryo just does not signal to the cow that she is pregnant, the cow comes back into heat and she fails to maintain that pregnancy. The effect of the sire. We're doing a lot of research right now at Texas A&M where we have a negative effect of the actual bull mating the cows, and some bulls might have negative, there might not be a tremendous compatibility to that bull where there is greater embryonic loss. The caveat here to understand is that you cannot detect the effect of the sire on 20 or 40 or 100 matings. You need somewhere in the range of 2,000 to 3,000 matings before you really know if that effect does occur. The one area that livestock producers have the best opportunity to have an impact on embryo survival is the nutritional management of the herd, making sure that within 60 to 90 days before the start of the breeding season, those females are on an increasing plane of nutrition, that they're not losing weight and they're not losing body condition score. There's a huge interaction between nutrition and reproduction, and this is the one area that we certainly have some positive effects that can be made by livestock producers. Temperament or handling stress, animals that are more flighty, or if they're mishandled during any process around the time of artificial insemination, or even natural service, if they're mishandled, you'll notice a decrease in pregnancy rates. So let me just quickly put together this sort of graph here, this bar graph. And so when you take a look at the bar graph, it sort of is an image of the table that I presented talking about attrition over time. And you'll notice on the left-hand side at fertilization there, we have about 95% fertilization rate. and then we lose about 25% of our pregnancies by the time we do our first pregnancy determination. And so what I want to say is that when we discover what our pregnancy rates are, we're not determining how many cows became pregnant. We're actually determining how many embryos or how many pregnancies survived to the point at which we did the pregnancy determination. So if we did a pregnancy determination at day 28 to 32, we would say in this example that we have a 70% pregnancy rate. It's actually a 70% survival rate of our pregnancies. And that's what we generally will call early embryonic loss. That's our early embryo loss. And in many cases, there's not a significant amount that we can do to increase survival of those embryos. And then there's a period of time after that we call a late embryonic or early fetal loss. And this is between that day 30 to somewhere between 60 and 100 days if you do another pregnancy determination at that point. And this is where we believe that we can save several embryos. And obviously a producer can do this by doing many good things right in terms of nutritionally feeding those cows or making sure they're good on a herd health program. They've received their PestGuard vaccinations and things like that producers can do to make sure that they are doing everything in their ability to decrease late embryonic loss. And so that's what we want to do, is we want to focus on saving some of those late embryos, because those are the ones that cost us the most money. An early embryonic loss, the cow will generally come back into heat and be able to become pregnant in her next cycle. It's the late embryonic loss cows that very often, if they lose the embryo at a later stage, they may not be able to become pregnant again during that breeding season. And so we want to try and save some of those late embryos. So let me talk then very quickly about synchronization systems and what do we have available. And so when it comes to synchronizing beef cows in Australia, we developed a system in 2003 called the 7-day co-sync placetor system. Still today, internationally, this is one of the most utilized synchronization systems out there. And the reason for that is it only requires handling the cows 3 times. So essentially what you do is you give an injection of cedarol when you put in a progesterone vaginal device, and in this case I have a cedar, but you can use Q-mates. You inject cedarol and put in the implant, and then 7 days later remove the cedar and give an injection of prostaglandin. And then about 60 to 66 hours later, you time AI every female and you give her an injection of GnRH. And so you handle those cows 3 times. So this is a protocol that we know works. And so if you end up with poor pregnancy rates, you know that it probably is not because of the synchronization system, because we know that this is a protocol that has worked. You're going to see a lot of different other protocols out there that people seem to want to try and utilize all the time, and that's okay. There are many protocols that work. The reason that we recommend this protocol is that you only handle the animals 3 times. It's somewhat convenient, and the pregnancy rates are acceptable. So that's the synchronization system for cows. For heifers, we have basically the same synchronization protocol, but if you notice down here, the difference between the cows and the heifer protocols is that for heifers, the interval between cedar removal and AI is only 54 hours and not that 60 to 66 hours. So just be aware of that if you're synchronizing heifers and cows, there's subtle differences in these synchronization systems that you need to be aware of. So a lot of people ask about, well, what can we expect in terms of pregnancy rates and especially for those that are just starting out, what are some of the expected pregnancy rates that we can expect? And so I I'm going to give you this example because this is an experiment that we did in 2013, and we collected a lot of information. We collected DNA, we collected lots of different data on these 8 different herds because we were trying to get a product approved for use in cattle to increase pregnancy rates. And so they were all synchronized with the 7-day co-sync CEDAR protocol, the protocol I just showed you. And if you take a look there are 8 different herds, and there's pregnancy rates that range anywhere from around 44% on the low end up to just under 66% on the higher end. And what we did is, after we completed this experiment, we delved into the data to try and figure out what it is about these 3 herds that ended up, just from a visual standpoint, having higher pregnancy rates than those 5 herds that had somewhere between 44 and 50% pregnancy rates. What was different about those 3 herds that had really good pregnancy rates versus those herds that didn't have quite as good of pregnancy rates? And all it basically came down to is that was consistent among those 3 herds that had good pregnancy rates was that those herds had been AI'd multiple times year after year after year. In the case of these 3 herds here, they had been AIing their cows consistently for 8 years or more. In these herds down at the bottom with the lower pregnancy rates, those herds had not AI'd consistently ever before. So they may have had one AI session and then they'd given up and then they tried again, but they hadn't stuck with their AI programs for a period of time. And so the take-home message that I get from this slide and from this set of data is that, you know, it takes time. It takes time to get into a system to allow pregnancy rates to become consistently good, because you get to manage the cows, and over time you actually bunch up the calving season. You get them a lot tighter, so you have more cows that are more longer postpartum by the time you start your breeding season every year. So you give more cows a chance to become pregnant, and ultimately it becomes a little bit more clockwork and you end up getting greater pregnancy rates. So I frequently get the question, what to expect for greater pregnancy rates? Can I expect 90% pregnancy rates, or should I expect 50%? Or what is the average pregnancy rates that I should expect? And I've shared with you a lot of things already that result in cows becoming pregnant. But there's no number that says you should expect 60% of your cows to become pregnant or 70%. You may speak to a producer that gets 80% pregnancy rates or has received 80% pregnancy rates on a set of cows. And you may speak to a producer that said he got 40% pregnancy rates. Well, there's very likely reasons that they got those pregnancy rates from a given synchronization system. The thing that I will tell you, though, is what do you blame for the poor pregnancy rates, or what do you attribute to getting good pregnancy rates? There may be many producers on here that are consistently getting 70% pregnancy rates. And I can tell you that it's very likely not because of the synchronization system, or because of the AI technician, or because of the semen, or because of the synchronization products. Those are things that seem to be very consistent from location to location, from herd to herd, and from country to country. But yet it seems like when people get poor pregnancy rates, they tend to blame those things first. They tend to say, well, it was my synchronization system, or it was the semen or the technician. But very often when we have producers that get very good pregnancy rates consistently from time to time, it's because they've done a lot of little things right. They have a very good nutrition program. They have a very tight calving window. They have very good herd health protocols in place. And so over time, they've consistently done these things well. That has resulted in them getting good response to a synchronization system. In those herds that tend to get lower pregnancy rates, there may be something off sync. in our observations, what we find is the herds that get poorer pregnancy rates, it's because of things that have occurred 60, 90, 120 days before that just might not have occurred quite as well as it probably should. Weather and climate play a role in this also. So don't necessarily look for reasons that you may not have had a success right up front because of those things that occur right around artificial insemination. Consider things that may have occurred previous to the time that you're actually going to synchronize your cows. The one thing that I will say is that synchronization and artificial insemination will not boost herd fertility. So if you have poor fertility or you have poor fertility in your herd, incorporating a synchronization and AI program into your herd isn't going to make you get better pregnancy rates than you would had you have poor fertility before. So the more fertile herds are going to have a better response, and the less fertile herds are going to have a poorer response. So I cannot tell everybody what to expect out of pregnancy rates, but what I can tell you is that it's really important to make sure that you don't necessarily blame the things that for those poor pregnancy rates around the time of AI. It might have occurred somewhere else. The other point that I want to make is that pregnancy has a 4 times greater economic impact than any other production trait. And I think sometimes we get very, very hung up on a lot of other traits. What's the weaning weight? What's the yearling weight of our animals? And we tend to spend a lot of time on a lot of these genetic tools that we have in our operations. But we very seldom think that, pregnancy is getting cows pregnant has far more economic impact than any of these other production traits. So don't take pregnancy lightly in your operation. Make sure you're culling for cows that don't become pregnant. Make sure you're getting rid of cows that become pregnant late in the breeding season. If you have a choice to cull cows, cull those cows for pregnancy. Make sure that you're eliminating those cows from your herd, because it's far more economically important than any other trait that you can select for. So let me share some data in terms of how we believe that we can increase the response or pregnancy rates and longevity of females in the herd. And one of these areas is in keeping heifers that are going to become pregnant early in the breeding season. And so this is some data out of the USDA mark by Bob Cushman, and it's on about 8,000 heifers that were inseminated over multiple years. And if you take a look here, the black line represents heifers that became pregnant in the first 21 days of their very first breeding season as heifers. The square blocks and the longer dots here are heifers that became pregnant in 22 to 42 days into the breeding season. And then the triangles are those heifers that became pregnant 43 days into their very first breeding season. And these lines represent the nine different calving seasons. And you'll notice as you extend this over 9 calving seasons, just because when they became pregnant as heifers, the longevity in the herd is greater in those animals that became pregnant early in their very first breeding season. And so we feel like it's really important, if you're going to increase the longevity in the herd and the success to any breeding program, is to select those heifers that are going to become pregnant in their very first breeding season. And there's some economic advantages of this too. When you take a look at the calves, the weaning weights of the calves from those same animals, and here the calves are through those 9 breeding seasons. This is the weaning weights of those calves. And all the way through the 7th calf, the weaning weights of those females that became pregnant in the first 21 days of their very first breeding season, the weaning weights of their calves were greater than from the females that became pregnant after the first 21 days of the very first breeding season through 7 calves. So that is quite an that has economic implications. And when you add all of the data together from these multiple calves right here, you end up with somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 of an extra calf weaned by those cows in the lifetime of those cows, just by simply keeping those cows that become pregnant in the first 21 days of the breeding season. And that's a significant economic impact. And so what we've done, and I have a case study where we followed cows and we put pressure on the herd for pregnancy over a period of time. And what we ended up doing is we gradually decreased the breeding season length, and we selected cows and heifers that were going to become pregnant early in the breeding season. And this is a survival curve, and each color represents a different year. Now, if you take a look at the olive line on the right and then the red line on the right, that would have been 2 years before we put any pressure on this herd for pregnancy. And essentially, these survival curves, what happens is that down at the bottom, you'll see the day of the calving season. And every time you have a cow that gives birth, you add those calves to the total until 100% of those calves are born. And so when you look at this survival curve, those curves that shift to the left mean that you're going to have more cows born early in the calving season. The more to the right you shift, the more the fewer cows you have giving birth during the calving season. And so we utilize these survival curves to take a look over time which herds are doing well and which herds are not doing very well. So in this one herd, we followed this herd for 7 years. And the red and the olive lines represent 2 years before we put any pressure or used any synchronization protocols or anything on these herds and put any pressure on for pregnancy. And you look how far to the right those curves are. The yellow line is the very first year that we put that we started selecting for pregnancy and using synchronization and AI. And you can see we really made a big jump towards the left. We bunched up the calving season a little bit tighter. But every subsequent line from there towards the left to that blue line was every subsequent year because we kept at it. And so as we kept at putting pressure on that herd for pregnancy, we bunched up more and more cows to calve earlier and earlier. And so the synchrony and the synchronization system, we ended up with greater and greater pregnancies year in and year out. The one point that I want to make here is that, you know, there are a lot of factors that result in pregnancy. And what I would like to point out is that we did not get hung up on the pregnancy rates to AI. What we wanted to do is we wanted to get more cows pregnant to calve early in the calving season. And very often the synchronization systems, what they do is they stimulate non-cycling cows to calve, to cycle so that they are eligible to become pregnant. And so sometimes our pregnancy rates to AI might be a little bit lower, but overall we end up with a greater percentage of cows calving just by exposing them to synchronization. So in this herd, when you take a look here, 2006 and 2007 would be the 2 years before we put any pressure on that herd for pregnancy. And in US dollars, if you take a look here, in 2008, just by putting pressure on the herd and synchronizing those cows and artificially inseminating them, every calf that we weaned from that year was worth $87 more than what they were the year before we put any pressure on that herd for pregnancy. And so after 6 years, you'll notice that every cow that gave birth had $169, every calf was worth $169 more than what they were worth 6 years before. And this is all on a constant calf price basis. So we use constant calf prices. And the reason for that is we didn't want calf values fluctuating from year to year. Overall, just to this operation alone, just by putting pressure on that herd for pregnancy and increasing the value of the wean calves, we brought in an extra $50,000 US to that herd of about 300 cows. So that is significant. So what I have here is I have some data from Enoch Bergman in Esperance and in Western Australia. And I've been helping Enoch with a demonstration project in which he exposed some heifers from a herd to synchronization and AI, and some heifers were not exposed. They were only mated by bulls. And when you take a look at this graph, the blue lines represent the calvings from heifers that became pregnant to synchronization and AI. And the orange line represents heifers that were not exposed to synchronization and AI. And look how far left to the we shifted the line for those heifers that were exposed to synchronization and AI. Does a very good job of bunching up cows to heifers to calve earlier in the calving season. And what that does then is that results in setting up those cows for success year after year after year, because they calve early that very first calving season. They will be more eligible to become pregnant in the second calving season, third calving season, and so on. And there'll be a lot more lifetime success out of those cows. I've also received a lot of questions about multiple new synchronization systems that are on the market. One of those would be the 7 and 7 sync that people have heard about. And you know, my point to those discussions is that almost any time that you handle the cows more frequently than the 3 times that I presented early in the presentation, if you handle the cows more frequently, you are going to get better pregnancy rates. And those numbers are somewhere between 0 and 7% more. And so there are multiple pre-synchronization treatments out there. The drawback of these pre-synchronization treatments is that there is extra handlings, and sometimes they're not as convenient. Now, all of these systems that I show on the screen are all systems that have some extra handling, but they're not necessarily silver bullets to improving fertility in your herd. Somewhere between 0 and 7% pregnancy rates is what you can expect. So when you see these new silver bullets or these new protocols that come out there, and right now the new hot protocol is 7 and 7 sync, what we've noticed over the time is that people realize that they likely don't end up with as great a bump in pregnancies as they actually had anticipated. And we've been using the 7 and 7 sync for 20 years in multiple operations. But what we find is over time, they start to tire of using those systems because it requires an extra animal handling. Down at the bottom left would be the 7 and 7 sync. And so you give an injection of prostaglandin when you put a seeder in, you give an injection of GnRH halfway through, and then you give an injection of prostaglandin when you remove the seeder. In cows, you need to artificially inseminate those cows at somewhere between somewhere around 66 to 72 hours. In heifers, it's really important to AI those heifers as early as 54 hours. But just be very aware that these systems, if you're going to incorporate any of these pre-synchronization treatments, that you need to understand the timing of when to inseminate those cows after you remove the seeder. And I'd be glad to answer individual questions on these later on. But for the most part, the take-home point here is know that when you're going to use one of these systems, it requires extra handling, and make sure if you're going to do it, you're going to have that there is some really key information that you need to know about timing. Let me very quickly talk about sex semen, because several people had asked about sex semen. And so sex semen has lots of advantages. I mean, you can select the gender of the animals, of the calves at a high accuracy of greater than 90%. It's not 100%, but it's greater than 90%. It can be used in embryo production. And the one good thing about sexing the semen through the process, you actually remove a lot of defective sperm through the process. Some of the disadvantages is that it is a little bit more expensive, and it has slightly lower fertility, and so you need to be aware of those disadvantages going in. So for sexing semen, what happens is we actually select for X sperm or for male sperm, which carries the Y chromosome. And generally, during the sexing process, all that is done is we understand or we know that sperm that has two X chromosomes is going to be about 3 to 4% larger or greater in weight than Y-bearing sperm are. And so based on that, that sperm can then be split based on size into X and Y bearing sperm. And so the whole process is done through flow cytometry, where we actually end up with sperm that gets split into X and Y chromosomes. And so when you take a look at what conventional semen looks like, in a conventional straw of semen or an ejaculate from a bull that's going to mate a cow, it would be basically 50-50 male or X-bearing versus Y-bearing sperm, and you'll have some defective sperm, but for the most part it would be split. And so depending on which sperm actually gets to the oocyte first and actually forms fertilization, that's going to be the sex of the calf. For sex semen, what we do is we eliminate one sex versus another. And certainly in terms of ABS's product, the Sexcel, right now the availability of the X-based sperm, the female, is available. And so you can buy Sexcel semen to produce females. And so essentially you create a very homogeneous unit of semen that gives you a 90% chance of creating a pregnancy. But let me just quickly tell you some of the drawbacks and some of the reasons that we actually have to artificially inseminate cows slightly differently with sex semen. So in this example, what I have is on the left-hand side, you'll see that arrow, and that represents when a female actually comes into estrus. And sometime after that female comes into estrus, about 24 to 30 hours after she shows estrus, she will ovulate. And so that orange bar up at the top there that says ovulation, that's sort of the ovulation window. Once a cow ovulates, that oocyte is viable for about 8 to 10 hours. And so we have to have sperm in the cow that is ready to mate the egg within 8 to 10 hours of when that egg is ovulated. So this green line represents conventional semen. And so because it's a very heterogeneous sample of semen, we have some semen that is capable of fertilizing those ovulated oocytes very early on, and we have some semen that goes through capacitation and takes a longer time to capacitate. So it might be viable a little bit longer. So we have quite a wide window with conventional semen to actually create a pregnancy with conventional semen. With sex semen, one of the things that we do is we've created a very homogeneous sample of semen. And so the viability of that semen to be able to get a cow pregnant or to get a heifer pregnant is a lot shorter. That window is very short. And so what we want to do is we want to do a far better job of creating an ovulation that is more consistent among a greater portion of your females that you're trying to AI. And so that does require that you probably do need to run those animals through the yards at least one more time. And so the system that we've developed, and we developed this on 3,000 matings of sex semen in the past year. And what we did is we injected an injection of prostaglandin about a week before we utilized the 7-day co-sync placenta protocol, where you inject cedarol when you put the cedar in, you inject prostaglandin when you pull the cedar out, and then you AI 72 hours after. And this timing is different from the traditional 7-day co-sync placenta. You want to wait 72 hours before you AI and give GnRH. And when you do that, you actually increase the pregnancy rates to almost comparable pregnancy rates that you would have had you used conventional semen and not given the prostaglandin injection. We're at the point that we've done a very good job with the system of causing ovulation to be very, very tight in those heifers. I'm going to very quickly touch on a new management tool that we're busy working on and doing research right now, and that is a tool. It's called Doppler ultrasound. Veterinarians, we're just starting to train veterinarians on this, but it's something for you to think about sort of moving forward as a potential management tool for you in your operations, especially the purebred operations that want to try and artificially inseminate more cows, be able to resynchronize cows and know which cows are pregnant sooner than what our current pregnancy determination systems are. And so we're utilizing this procedure called Doppler ultrasound, where we actually want to look at blood flow or blood perfusion through the corpus luteum. And so if the corpus luteum is a functional corpus luteum, there's going to be more blood flow through that corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum is important because it secretes progesterone, which tells the cow she's pregnant. If it's not functional, that means that the female is likely not pregnant or is about to lose her pregnancy. And so what we do with Doppler ultrasound, you'll take a look on the left panel here, and you'll see that gray oval there. That is a corpus luteum on the ovary. When we incorporate Doppler ultrasound, this shows that there's a tremendous amount of blood perfusion, or there's blood flowing through the corpus luteum. On the right-hand side, you'll notice non-functional corpus luteum. See, there's very little blood flow through that corpus luteum, and so that corpus luteum is not functional, and so that female is not going to retain the pregnancy or is losing her pregnancy. And so we can detect these pregnancies a lot sooner than we can with any other pregnancy diagnosis tool. So what we've been able to do, and we've just got some data in the last 2 days on this, but in dairy cattle, we've been very accurate of determining pregnancy at about day 20 of pregnancy. We're in dairy cows, and in beef cows, we're at 100% sensitivity of being able to determine if a cow is not pregnant. We can tell you that she, with 100% degree of accuracy, that she's not pregnant. Now, there are some false negatives. In other words, some cows, there's a portion of cows that you don't, that may lose their pregnancies later on. But in terms of telling whether a cow is not pregnant at day 20, we have been 100% accurate on those cows. And so this allows us then to be able to really compress our times between artificial insemination. If you take a look at this figure, traditionally in resynchronization programs, if we wanted to artificially inseminate multiple times, what we would have to do is we would time AI, and then we would wait for a period of time before we could do a pregnancy diagnosis. And then once we did a pregnancy diagnosis, we would resynchronize the open cows and artificially inseminate them. And that would have been about a 40-day intervals between AIs. So then that led us to other forms of resynchronization, where you resynchronize cows before you know which cows are pregnant. And then once you know that they're pregnant, you can give the cows that are not pregnant an injection of prostaglandin and then time AI. And so that decreased pregnancy, at least intervals between AIs, by down to 32 days. Now with Doppler ultrasound, we're down to having intervals between 21 and 24 days by being able to determine whether these cows are pregnant. And so we're just introducing veterinarians to this. And so our hope is at time we can train some veterinarians that might be able to come onto your operations and utilize Doppler ultrasound to be able to turn over these pregnancies a lot quicker and give you a chance to get those cows pregnant. So that sort of finishes up my presentation. I know that many of you have sent in questions, and if I haven't answered those questions during my presentation, I've tried to sort of bring up some of those questions that I don't think I might have answered here, but I'm also going to encourage you while I'm answering these questions to send in some more questions through the chat. So let me start out here. And the first question I wanted to answer was, how important is overall herd fertility before embarking on an AI program? Well, the answer is, and I think I addressed this right at the beginning, the answer is that AI is not going to improve herd fertility. It may contribute over time to being able to get cows pregnant that were not able to, may not have been cycling previously, but it's not going to improve herd fertility. So if you have poor fertility, don't expect better pregnancy rates with AI than you do in your program. At the same time, to just know that you know, it takes time to get really good pregnancy rates to AI, and we have some really good high fertility herds that don't AI, and we have some very poor herds that do AI. But just make sure that over time you're selecting for fertility. There's no one candidate that's better than others. Just know that if you're going to select, if you're going to utilize artificial insemination, if you have a fairly high fertile herd, you're going to get very good pregnancy rates. If you don't, you're not going to get very good pregnancy rates. So make sure you temper your expectations. Next question I had was, do cows in AI programs get less fertile the more times that they are in fixed timed AI programs? And no, the question is, the answer is quite simple, no. The products that we utilize in cows to synchronize them are the same products that the cows use themselves in a 21-day estrus cycle. We're not using any protocols, any products here that will make them less fertile over time. Now, one thing you will notice is that cows over time become less fertile. I mean, when they become old, they don't ovulate quite as many oocytes. Their fertility decreases. But in most herds, these products that we use are not going to have a negative impact at all. Are there other options to replace Cedarol in an EU accredited herd? And yes, if you need to replace Cedarol, Cedarol is an estradiol benzoate based product that is sold in Australia. But if you are not allowed to use an estradiol or a steroid hormone in your synchronization system, then you can simply replace Cedarol with GnRH. The drawback with that is that that you should not expect to see the same type of heat response when you use GnRH versus when you use Cedarol. But in terms of pregnancy rates, there's not a massive difference. I like Cedarol at the beginning of the protocols when you can, because it does a slightly better job of synchronizing follicles. However, you can use GnRH at the start rather than Cedarol, and you're not going to see a big dip in your overall pregnancy rates. Now, there's a caveat to that, and that is if you're utilizing Bos indicus-based animals, Cedarol is definitely better than GnRH. What is your preference choice of prostaglandin, either cloprostanol or dinoprost? There's no difference. You know, depending on the company that you are purchasing your products from, or your veterinarian is getting your products from, there is no difference when it comes to synchronization of beef cattle. We have beat this into oblivion by doing side-by-side studies of those two products, and the two products that were originally on the market are Estramate and Ludilice. Now there are generic products of those two that are out there. Both products work equally well in synchronization systems. So don't. My recommendation is purchase the cheapest. How do you see the use of PMSG in ovulation protocols? Well, so PMSG is also called ECG, or PMSG stands for pregnant mare serum gonadotropin, and more recently it's been called ECG, or equine chorionic gonadotropin. And so there is a product on the market called Pregnacol, and it's an ECG-based product. It has a lot of opportunities, especially in herds that are going to synchronize cows that are non-cycling. And so where we see this being utilized more with some success is in more Bos indicus-based herds. So administering ECG at the time you remove the CIDR or you give prostaglandin, at that time, it helps follicle development. You have to be careful about the use of ECG though. And the reason for this is that in cows that are cycling, so which tends to be more in the Bos taurus-based cows, in those Bos taurus-based cows, if you have a high percent of cycling cows, you might actually see a decrease if you utilize ECG. And so if you know that a high percentage of your cows are at risk, like they're thin or they're late calving or they're young cows, ECG might work. But if you have mature cows that you're going to expect good response to, I would definitely not use ECG in those herds. What's the best fixed time AI protocol for Brahmins or Bos indicus? And again, I mentioned making sure that you're using a cedarol-based protocol that utilizes estradiol benzoate. The drawback of Bos indicus-based animals is that they tend to be a little bit more temperamental when you handle them. So you want to try and find a system that has as few handlings as possible. So the system that I showed at the beginning of the protocol, the 7-day coasting CIDR, is a viable option. But the one thing that I think is really important to understand is not to expect the same pregnancy rates out of your Brahmins or your Bos indicus-based animals as you would out of Bos taurus-based animals. Expect about a 5 to 10% lower pregnancy rates. If you do have, if you don't mind running cows through the yards an extra time or two, feel free to send Bill or Fletcher or Kim an email, and they'll contact me and they'll ask me for a different protocol, and I'll share with them a protocol or two that might be additional options. But from a blanket recommendation, I would recommend the protocol that I listed at the beginning of this presentation. So I have a lot of people to thank that have been responsible for helping me do my research program, and they're all listed here. I've had a lot of different companies and organizations that have funded a lot of the work. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for giving me a chance to speak tonight. And if you have any questions too, you'll see my email on that slide. And so I'll turn it back over to Fletcher Bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cliff, and thank you everyone tonight for joining us. I'm sure you'll agree that was very informative. So thank you, Cliff, for getting up nice and early over there in the States and making the time to speak to everyone tonight. Just in the interest of time, I am going to just keep this to one question. We have had quite a few questions submitted tonight. Cliff, I'll catch up with you at a later date, and we'll catch up and get some of those other questions addressed in due course. I'm just going to choose one while we get ready for our new speaker. How likely is it that early embryonic loss is the bull's fault?
That's a very good question, and we're doing a lot of research on that right now. We are finding out more and more that the bull actually, during a fertilization, generally we would assume that the bull and the cow contribute equally to the development of the developing embryo. Well, what we do know right now is, and we're finding this out by doing some really technical experiments, but we know that the bull is more responsible for developing the placenta in a developing pregnancy, and the cow is more responsible, the DNA from the cow is more responsible for helping develop the embryo itself in a developing pregnancy. And so what we're finding out is that some bulls don't do a great job of allowing the placenta to develop, so yes, the bull has a significant role in the development of a placenta and survival of the embryo. The problem we have right now is understanding which bulls have an increase in embryo loss versus which bulls don't, right? And so we're doing a lot of work there. That's sort of a big focus of our research right now. So bulls do play a significant role.
Thanks, Cliff. That's really interesting. One more question, just as Matt's getting set up there with Bill. Does the fat score or the condition score of a cow impact its pregnancy rate? I think I probably know the answer to this one, but I'll let you. Away you go.
Yeah. Condition score does have an impact, but it's more than just absolute condition at the time you AI. It's approaching the breeding season. So animals that are on an increasing plane of nutrition certainly will respond better than animals that are on a decreasing or level nutritional program. And so, yeah, so if you just said, yeah, my animals are in good condition on the day you artificially inseminated them, that might not be the full story. They may be in decent condition, but they may have been in better condition 3 months ago. Well, that's not going to be very good for pregnancy rates. Or they may be in just subpar condition, but they may have been in a lot worse shape 3 months ago, and those animals might actually end up with greater pregnancy rates. And so it's how they get to that point. And so don't look at absolute condition on the day you AI, but look at the change in condition over time.
Fantastic. Thanks very much once again for your time tonight, Cliff, and for everyone watching at home. On behalf of everyone, we're very grateful for you making the time and to speak to us and giving us such an insightful overview of everything. So thank you very much once again, Cliff.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to jump over to Bill Cornell now, who is going to introduce Matt Aikenhead.
Yes, thanks everybody. And certainly to Cliff, it was wonderful to hear you talk again, Cliff. Again, such an inspiration to all of us in achieving a better result for our cattle and for our pregnancy rates. And to everybody out there that might have questions that they didn't get, please email them to us, and we'll have Cliff address them in due course, and then they'll be available up on the website at a later date. I'm now handing over to Matt Aikenhead. Matt has been the ABS Australia Technical Service Manager now for 12 years. He does a terrific job out there. And the purpose of having Matt here to talk about is that we've heard about all the good oil about heading everything together, but for us at AI, sometimes it becomes just a thing that we just do off-road. And it's always good to audit what we do. And I'm going to hand over to Matt to give us some good tips on how to achieve a better result. Thanks, Matt.
Okay. All right. see myself. So anyway, good evening, everyone. Yeah, my brief tonight was to go through the basics of semen handling, so that, like Cliff said, a lot of what happens as far as maintaining pregnancy is up to the cow. But if we get the semen handling wrong, we can stop a good result before we even start. So what I wanted to just bring up was 4 basic steps that count. Anyway, so the 4 basic steps that count that I wanted to rip through tonight were the non-negotiable things, the things that we can't change, that we have to get right when we're using ABS semen. So first of all, the first thing I wanted to bring up was straw identification and transfer. We want to know what semen we're going to get before we lift the goblet. We want to work, when we're working, we want to work with tweezers, and we want to work below the thaw, below the frost line in the tank. We also want to transfer it quickly from the liquid nitrogen across into our thaw flask. Thawing. Thawing's done in water that's 35 to 37 degrees Celsius. And we need to have it in the water for a minimum of 45 seconds. The one thing I just want to mention there is we recommend that the straws are fully covered by water, so we get uniform thawing through the whole straw. Loading and storage. So once we've thawed the semen, we want to load our guns. We need those guns to be at 35 to 37 degrees Celsius. And we need to store those guns at that temperature. So we need to make sure that we're not causing cold shock or heat stress on the semen. We need to maintain those constant temperatures. We also need to make sure that we keep all the semen out of the elements. So obviously light, wind are things that can damage water, are all things that will damage the semen cells. Okay, and then from thawing into the cow, we want to do, for conventional semen, our recommendation is less than 15 minutes for conventional, so straight from the liquid nitrogen to time when it goes into the cow, 15 minutes, and for sex cell product, we want to be less than 5 minutes, so 15 and 5. So that's the 4 steps really quickly. I just want to change the way we think about that a little bit, because any of us that are technicians that inseminate know that it's a game of 1%ers. So the way I like to think about that is we need to go along the steps to achieve what we want. So we make sure we've got the correct straw identified, we transfer it, we do the thawing step correctly, we do the loading and storage step correctly, and eventually we end up with I can't see that. So eventually we end up with our ultimate goal, and that is a pregnancy. So we want to think of it like that. I put this slide in there to remind everyone that it's also very important. The overarching theme of what we want to do is have good hygiene. So a clean, organised work environment like this one is ideal. It's working out the back of a ute. Also very important that we, like I said at the start, just to recap, we want to make sure we work below the frost line in the tank, so we're not working out. We need to use tweezers, and we also want to make sure we know what we're doing before we lift that semen up. Protecting from light, wind, etc. That's just recapping where the frost line is in the tank for anyone that isn't overly aware of it. Okay, so normally this is the one where I get some comments from the group around covering the straw. Some people don't think it's a good idea. We recommend it. It is a good idea. You need to cover the straw totally with water, because that allows for consistent thawing. The one comment I'll make there is that those 3 straws that are jammed together, that's not ideal. We want to, when we introduce the straw into the thaw flask, we want to make sure that we spread out the straws, and again, that's around allowing for consistent, uniform thawing. Okay, so do we check our water temperature weekly, or do we check it weekly with an A? It's important that we check the temperature of our water. Sometimes these units can drift away from their 35 to 37 degree setting and get a little bit hot. If they're too hot, you'll kill the cells and you won't get any pregnancies at all. So we should check that. We should check our thermometers from time to time as well. We should check that all the time, every week. And if we ever need to change it, that little dial at the bottom there on the right hand picture is the way we do that. Just be very careful when you're playing around with them. I've had my unit for about 6 years and I think I've only had to touch it once, so you don't have to touch that very often. What do we do when we are loading and storage of the AI guns at 35, 37 degrees Celsius? My preference is a gun warmer. That's what I use when I'm AIing. My preference is that you clean that insert at least once a week. We want to avoid poor hygiene. That'll cost us pregnancies as we go along. And finally, the fourth point that I put up earlier was timing from thaw to insemination. Remember, we want to have it from when we take it out of the tank, the semen out of the tank, to when we put it in the cow. We want no longer than 15 minutes, so less than 15 minutes for conventional and less than 5 minutes for sex cell as a current recommendation. Goes in the water for 45 seconds is the minimum amount of time. It can stay in for a little bit longer. You know, if you need to, while you wait to load the other guns. Something that I would recommend from time to time, no matter whether you're a really experienced technician or not, I do it from time to time, is make sure, just use your watch or your phone or something and just check your timing. Just set a timer and let it count down. Just make sure you're getting those units into the cow in a timely manner. So what does that look like? Straw identification transfer gets us part of the way. Thawing at 35 to 37 degrees for 45 seconds gets us the next step. Loading and storage at that same temperature gets us the next step. And finally, into the cow in 15 minutes or 5 minutes for sex cell gets us the next step, and hopefully we generate a calf out of that process. So, little question from the side: do we leave straws in the water for longer than 60 seconds? The answer to that is you can. The main consideration in these 4 basic steps is that it's in the cow. You're not getting temperature variation, so you're right to leave it in the water, but you don't want to leave it there for too long because obviously you want to get it into the cow. Yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to add. If there's any questions, I can take them, but I don't know what we've got, so we can keep going. What do you want to do? No questions. Awesome. I did a great job. Okay, let's take it over.
Thank you very much, Matt. For those who don't know me, my name's Fletch. Our next segment tonight is going to be a preview of something we've been very excited about, something we've been working on pretty hard behind the scenes now. It is called Around the Grounds with ABS. It's an interactive video series that we've put together to basically document Australian seed stock and commercial herds, beef herds, and basically bring them to you rather than you having to do the rounds yourself. So Around the Grounds with ABS will be debuting tonight. Our first cab off the rank is the wonderful team down at Weir and Angus in Western Victoria, headed up by Alec and Joe Moore. We're joined by Alec and Tom from Weir and Angus tonight. We will be releasing one of these episodes per month, and you'll be able to view them on social media, and you'll also be able to see them via a link that will be from an email once a month. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Melinda, and she is going to start the first Around the Grounds, which should run for about 3 to 5 minutes tonight for you, just to give you a taste of what's to come. So thank you and enjoy. G'day, I'm Fletch Kelly. Welcome to another episode of Around the Grounds with ABS. Today I'm south of Hamilton at Weir and Angus. I'm joined by Tom French and Alec Moore. Alec's the stud principal and owner of Weir and Angus, and Tom French is one of the stud managers out here. Alec, if I could just start with you, could you just give all our viewers at home a bit of a brief overview of the Weir and herd, some of the key bloodlines that your herd's based on, and just a general overview of, staff and the total operation, including the sheep?
Yep. No, my pleasure, Fletch. Look, Weir is, we grew from a commercial base and in the early days in the late 1960s, early 70s. So we're breeding Angus cattle for a long time. We're one of the early herds in the NBRS scheme who graduated to group breed plan, and then with some education at a Hereford herd, I decided bull breeding was something I thought I could do. And sometimes really good things grow slowly, and we're pretty impressed with where we're headed.
Fantastic. And roughly how many bulls per year are you selling at Weir? And you've obviously got the spring sale and the autumn sale going.
Yeah, selling 150 odd bulls a year has been probably our target. And depending on how viable it is, hopefully we can at least lift the quality of our 150 bulls or expand the program in the future if the opportunity arises.
Now, French, if I could throw to you, obviously you're fairly involved here in the bull breeding side of things, and what are some of the key attributes that your clients look for in the Weir and bulls, and what are some of the key elements that you believe make a good, successful bull breeding program that keeps your clients coming back to Weir and each year?
I think the main thing is probably temperament. I think that's a good base to start off with, and let everything else fall in place. Definitely having a large impact now on sort of calving ease and those carcass traits.
Okay. Yep.
There's a real push for that, so we're pushing on for that as well too, to give those rewards through to our commercial clients. And real high functional cattle. It's all well and good having the figures off the roof, but really they're not working out in the paddock and doing the job. What's the point of having them?
Exactly.
So they're sort of our three main attributes I think that we look for and that we're striving towards.
Cool. Now, Frenchie, over the years that you've been here at Weir, and are there any key ABS bulls that really stand out in your mind that you believe have done a good job in either the seed stock or the commercial herd here at Weir?
Edmund's probably one that comes to mind now with his older cows coming through. Was probably a breed leader at the time for IMF.
Yep.
Sure. And I think a lot of milk might have been in there too. We've got a few daughters now coming through that are sort of coming into the donor pens. They've sort of proven themselves with 4 or 5 calves on the ground. One sort of the newer ones of things like Command. We've got a really nice Command son that we've kept. Really good calving ease, good growth, moderate sort of frame package, nice easy doing, good temperament.
Great structure.
Cool.
And excellent structure.
Yeah, it's one thing he's been renowned for.
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Yep. And most recently you've had some enhanced calves come through as well?
Yep, pretty excited with the way they're coming along. We've had the first run of enhanced at our spring sale last year, and there's a couple in this year's sale.
Yep.
And they're really good calving ease again there too. Pretty good structure so far, what we're seeing with the early days, and the good carcass traits.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you very much for that really brief but thorough insight into the Weir program. It's been fascinating. There is one more question that I'd really like to ask you. It's probably not a question that gets asked enough within the Australian seed stock sector. Tom, if I can start with you, if you could be any fruit, what would you be and why?
I'd be a kiwi fruit, because then I'd have more hair.
Okay, that's a good one. And Alec, what would you be?
I still think I'd be a should
Right. Okay. Should I ask why? Or?
Full of energy.
Okay.
Full of energy and just keep me rocking.
Cool. Well, you heard it here first at Weir and Angus. Thanks very much for joining us for another episode of Around the Grounds with ABS. We'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Fletch.
Thank you very much.
Well, there you have it. There's the first episode of Around the Grounds done and dusted down there. Thank you very much to Weir and Angus and the team there for their time, for joining us for the first episode of Around the Grounds with ABS. Stay tuned, because you never know, you could be the next herd that features on Around the Grounds. So more to come in the next couple of months there with that exciting new initiative. It's now time to introduce the final segment for the night tonight, ABS Australia 2021 Beef Sire Update. Obviously, this is a reproductive webinar, so we won't spend too much time on the bulls tonight, but obviously it would be remiss of us not to cover a couple of the key new bulls that are coming through the ABS ranks, as well as some of the very popular bulls over the last year or so, and just to highlight some of their strengths as well. I'm just going to get this started. Before I get into the bulls tonight, I just really wanted to make mention that recently our Australian beef product manager, Bill Cornell, who basically everyone in the world involved with beef knows very well. Bill, a couple of weeks ago at the 2021 NHIA dinner, received the Laurie Wells Award for which is recognised for meritorious service to the herd improvement sector. And Bill has been very, very heavily involved in the herd improvement sector in the beef game for the better part of 40 years now, and has helped so many people along the way, and has been instrumental in building so many strong and successful seed stock and commercial herds. Bill's also been very instrumental in leading the way for a lot of young people within the industry, both farmers, seed stock producers, commercial producers, has helped ABS globally to build their beef program, has also been instrumental for people like myself, like Kim Sultana, and also most recently Annie to come on board. So Bill, on behalf of everyone watching tonight and myself and the rest of the ABS team, we congratulate you and we thank you for your many, many years of service. And we couldn't think of a more deserving award for someone. So congratulations to you, Bill. And without further ado, I'm going to get on to our first bull for the night. I'm going to hand over to Bill to give a really quick rundown of none other than Millamurra Paratrooper P15. Just firstly, sorry, I forgot about that. The beef sire update is coming out shortly. So the autumn update, it's going to have some of the new bulls that we're covering tonight, as well as some of the bulls that have been very popular for us over the last year or two. So that'll be emailed out shortly to you in the coming days, and you'll also receive a sneak peek through social media tomorrow of this update. So stay tuned, make sure you're on our email and mail out lists. Just head to our website if you'd like to sign up for those. Now I'm actually going to get on to the first bull of the night. So enjoy this section with Bill Cornell. Thank you.
Thanks, Fletch. Thanks for those kind words. It's always been an honour to be involved in the beef industry. And as I say to people, what better job could anybody ever have? Talking about Paratrooper, the current record price Angus bull, 160k. And he's performed absolutely beyond our expectations out there. Paratrooper's been used far and wide through Australia and also over into New Zealand. His progeny born really well out of heifers. And at weaning, we're hearing people talk about the dimension, the volume, the mass, the docility of the calves is just unsurpassed. And the yearlings that we've seen from early matings are just looking unbelievably good. So we'll be looking forward to seeing the Paratrooper sons out there in the spring of this year. Paratrooper's eclipsed all our sale records out there for a beef bull of his age. And the numerous calls and accolades of this bull that suggest to us that he's going to be used for many seasons to come. The last thing we'd like to say about Paratrooper is inventory is extremely low at the moment, and he's on a truck in the next few days heading into the AI collection centre. So we should be right for the autumn. I'm now going to pass over to Fletch, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of the other bulls. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Bill. Certainly Paratrooper has been a bull that has been incredibly popular, both seed stock and commercial wise, throughout Australia. So very pleasing to see what the future holds for him. The second bull that we wanted to cover tonight is certainly a bull that's caused a lot of buzz over the last 6 to 12 months, especially since the release of his new photos last year in December. They came out, and yeah, he's certainly been a very popular addition to a number of seed stock and commercial herds over the last 12 months. I first inspected new ground as a around 11-month-old bull. I was down there at landfall with Frank, and I was just totally captivated and in awe about the sire appeal of this bull, the length in the bull, the thickness, and just how far ahead of his contemporary group he was at that young age. We then went on to purchase the bull in partnership with Absolute Angus, and he's just developed into an absolute powerhouse, and certainly a very exciting prospect for a lot of you watching at home tonight involved in the Angus world. As you can see there, phenotypically, he is as long as a train. He's thick-topped, he's deep, he's square-made, He's nice and clean underneath, and he's got a big set of nuts, and he stands very well on some good feet and legs there. So from a phenotype standpoint, in my view, I think he's a very hard bull to go past, and he offers a no holes option for a lot of people, not only as a cow option, but now a proven heifer bull. So very exciting times for this bull. Yesterday was very exciting. The first 41 N90 sons sold for a combined average of $16,000 at the Landfall Angus Autumn Bull Sale, which is quite extraordinary for a bull to have that contemporary group size of 41 sons and average just that high. They were the top selling sire group. The bull is also backed by a prolific maternal line, including with a female pedigree, including 9 donors from the Landfall herd. So again, very, very impressive from a pedigree standpoint. Speaking to Frank recently, he really is down there at Landfall a versatile no holes breeding option. He has been used over larger frame cows just to moderate them down a fraction, but he's also been used over some smaller, dumpier cows to actually just give them a little bit more lift while maintaining that exceptional length and thickness. Now, if the bull's phenotype doesn't impress you enough, then his data set certainly should. He's got a little bit of calving ease there, a nice low birth weight at 3.7. He's right out to 144 for his 600-day weight. He's also plus 20 for milk and a whopping 6.3 for scrotal. He also has a nice high docility ranking, as you can see there. And speaking to a few people recently, he's certainly fixing the temperament in a lot of progeny out there. Nice eye muscle area and a carcass combination there. He's got some positive fats, which a lot of people are looking for these days, and a very handy IMF figure of 3.2. So you've got the phenotype, you've got the proven sons coming through now that are selling very well, and you've got an incredible data EBV profile there. So certainly a bull that a lot of seed stock and commercial producers can be looking towards this year. The second bull for the night is Millamurra Coyote Q96. He's the newest Millamurra addition to our ABS stables. He is an S Chisholm son out of a beautiful Millamurra Cluny cow up there at Millamurra. We were at ABS really enjoying seeing the Chisholms come through in Australia. He wasn't one of our bulls. We probably wished he was. He just exhibited tremendous phenotype, tremendous structure, and just added so much thickness and fantastic muscle pattern to his progeny. And we certainly saw that in Coyote. The only problem was the bull was quite low for his IMF. So for a lot of those people that are looking for that sort of breed average IMF or perhaps a little bit better, he was eliminated, unfortunately, for their selection. So we did select Coyote based on the fact that not only did he have a lot of the nice attributes from his dam and also his sire Chisholm, but he also had a really nice, balanced and versatile EBV data set. Taking a closer look at the bull, he was a $60,000 top selling bull from the 2020 Millamurra spring sale. As I said, tremendous thickness and eye appeal and carcass composition in this bull. For those that are interested in the pedigree side, he has an unsurpassed maternal pedigree backed by some prolific Millamurra donor females, including the Millamurra matriarch, Brenda Y33, and also the well-renowned Prue H4, who, for those who have followed Millamurra Cluny, is the dam of Millamurra Cluny. So very, very strong maternal pedigree in this bull. As I said, the sire S Chisholm 255 adds plenty of thickness and really impeccable structure to Q96. I've been very pleased with his foot angle, his foot claw shape, and he should please a lot of people in that respect, I think. A really nice even data spread there, plenty of calving ease, moderate to low birth. And you'll see there with his 600-day weight, he's up to 125, but he drops down to 88 for his mature cow weight, which is something we really like to see in our Angus cows these days, just getting them a little bit more moderate, a little bit more efficient. He is 8.1 for eye muscle area, breed average for fats, and as I mentioned before, for his IMF, he sits at 1.9, which for those people that have followed the Chisholm sons coming through across the country, I'm sure you'll agree that 1.9 for IMF for a Chisholm son is pretty impressive. So a no holes data set there, very versatile for any seed stock or commercial producer. The newest ABS bull in terms of Angus that we've acquired is Banquet Quarter Pounder Q252. Now, like any delicious, tasty quarter pounder, this fella absolutely packs the meat into him. I was really captivated by the bull when I saw him earlier this year, and we came back and looked at him several times after that. The bull certainly has a lot of meat in him. He's strong topped, he's deep flanked, he's got meat throughout, and he's nice and big boned, and he's certainly got a fantastic temperament on this bull. So from all angles, phenotypically, I was really pleased with what I saw on the multiple times that I've inspected him. Stands on a nice set of feet and legs and tracks pretty nicely as well. He is an early maturing type of bull, so I suggest that he's going to be a bull that will work really well over some of those smaller, flatter sided, higher indexing type cows, just to add a little bit of lift and a little bit of punch, and just to get some muscle pattern back into some of those flatter sided cows. So certainly a bull that we're very excited about, as well as the partners that bought into the bull. There will be commercial semen available on this bull shortly, and we'll be holding the seed stock semen on this bull over to spring later this year. Taking a closer look at the bull, he was the $60,000 top selling bull from this year's banquet autumn sale. As I said, he is thick topped, he's deep flanked, and he's got a great muscle pattern and also a great maturity pattern there. He has a balanced EBV data set and a frame score of 6'8", so he's just that sort of bull that's just going to add that little bit more frame and power to some of those smaller females. For those of you watching tonight that are really interested in the pedigree of some bulls, he does have 4 crosses of the Hingai 469 bull, 4 crosses of the Kiwi Dream M41, who is actually the granddam of the Y301 bull, and he is absolutely loaded with banquet ancestry there. So very impressive. Sit Stella 706D is a bull from the States that we've been very impressed with here in Australia for the last year and a little bit. He's one of those bulls that every now and then they come out of the States, and he is absolutely flawless for his phenotype and also his structure. It's something that a lot of people are wanting, a bull from the US that actually has good feet and legs and can pass that on to his progeny. He is the top 1% for US claw shape and structure EPDs over there. And in my opinion, he really is a sleep easy, sleep tight heifer option that's going to give you plenty of good structure to fix up any of those poor footed cattle. Interestingly, the first 17 sons that sold at the SITS spring sale recently over there in the US, they averaged $20,265 US. So from all reports, people are tripping over themselves getting to the sales to try and find stellar sons to purchase. So we've been extremely pleased with what we see in the young progeny out here. The bull is certainly a heifer option. He's 2.4 for birth, and he also offers plenty of growth out to 145 for his 600 days. So a heifer option that's going to give you good structure, good temperament, and a heap of power and thickness. You've got to look towards Sit Stella. He is also available in Sex L, sexed female, due to the strong maternal qualities in this bull. Little bit of a different bull now is GB Fireball, a bull that a lot of stud producers will be well familiar with now. Certainly a carcass improving bull with some fantastic EBV data. What's been very pleasing though is that for a primarily carcass used bull, we're getting a lot of reports in Australia here about just how well the progeny are looking, how stylish, how thick top they are, and just how much eye appeal they've got. And so many people have come back to us and said, wow, we used him for his carcass. We actually can't believe how well these young progeny are looking, which has been very pleasing to hear. He is a true bomb-proof heifer option. He has a ton of calving ease, low birth weight, explosive growth, and impressively, he's got a 12.7 EMA figure, and he's 3.9 for his IMF and 1% for all indexes for those who follow the indexes. So across the board, you're getting a very strong carcass bull here, and also adding plenty of power and plenty of phenotype to the progeny as well. So GB Fireball has a very bright future here in Australia. Our final Angus bull for the night is obviously one of my personal favourites, and I've spoken about him numerous times on Talking Bull and also the Angus Australia Bull Night. Baldridge Command C306, just an absolute powerhouse of a bull. He's as long as a train, he's deep, he's thick, he's square topped, and he's breeding excellent females and bulls as well, with and certainly stamping them with some great feet. He has a great EBV profile. He has a low birth, plenty of explosive growth, top 1% for his EMA, and he's got plenty of IMF as well. So he's a bull that's been very popular over the last 2 to 3 years here in Australia, and has certainly got a bright future ahead of him for years to come here. Thank you. That's all I've got tonight on the Angus bulls. I'm going to hand over to our newest ABS team member, Annie Pumper, and she's going to give us a rundown of the Herefords and a couple of other breeds there. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and I really hope you've all enjoyed our webinar. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that very insightful introduction to the black bulls that are coming through this season, Fletch. I'm sure enjoying seeing the progeny out there and moving forward in the industry. It's a very exciting time, so it's a good opportunity to get onto these really impressive bulls. Just to start off with, I'm going to cover the Herefords and a speckled park bull that we acquired at the end of last year. First of all, the Herefords Australia Supersize program is something that ABS Australia are very fond of and have a lot to do with. Bill Cornell actually helped launch this program in 2018 in conjunction with Herefords Australia, and we actually had the first super sire, Waruna Maddie, on board, and has been used extensively through Australia and overseas as well. And the aim of that program was to offer elite genetics to the open market with the opportunity to increase the Hereford footprint and influence into the marketplace, and that's definitely occurred over the last couple of years. Excitingly, Herefords Australia have actually released the second phase of the Super Sire program, and we've been able to acquire a second bull into that out of I think there's 7 now. So as I said, a program that we have a lot to do with, and we look forward to picking up bulls in the future from it. As I said, the first bull, Waruna Maddie M288, he's rising 5 now. We've got that mature photo that came out at the end of last year, and it actually excited a lot of people. I've inspected the bull twice, and cosmetically he's absolutely outstanding for a Hereford bull. He's got a lot of carcass about him. He really is full of red meat, and I think, you know, at the end of the day, that's what we're here to produce. So a bull that we can put over our heifers. He's a sleep easy proven heifer option. He's actually the trait leader for gestation length and IMF as well, so he's a bull that's backed by data as well, and has that phenotype to go with it. He's sired by that industry leading sire Allendale Anzac E114, and you know, he's in a lot of pedigrees, and we definitely think we picked up the best. Maddie reports he's been used quite extensively through commercial programs. We haven't had any problems with calving at all with Maddie. His conception data is coming back quite well. I think he's a gold sire now for HCR. Bulls are selling, his sons are selling through the sales over in SA and have been topping out at $15,000 to $20,000 consistently. So we're super excited at the progeny that's coming through. He's got milking daughters now, and we'll be seeing those in the future. Most excitingly, just a couple months ago or a month ago, we acquired Injamara Redford, Robert Redford Q287. Bill and I inspected this bull in November at the end of last year, and there was no opportunity for us to walk away from this bull without him coming home to the ABS stable. In conjunction with Veal Pastoral and Ardno Herefords and post-sale, Jared Genetics come on board, we bought the bull for $160,000, which was a record that it had not been broken in 35 years. So very impressive record, and he's definitely worth that money. He's got that combination of phenotype and genotype that we want to see, and it's really hard to find a bull in any breed, I believe, that actually has those combination. His outcross pedigree, so he's by that Redford J006 bull out of the Injamara program, going back to some genetics from over in New Zealand there. So he's going to be able to go out into the industry and cover a lot of cows and bring a new opportunity in terms of pedigree into your program. I believe that this bull has a lot of commercial reality, seed stock reality, and also here in Australia and internationally. Injamara Robert Redford is, you know, a bull that is low birth, has a lot of growth behind him. I think he's 1.6 for IMF, high EMA, and I just think there's no other bull in any breed that can actually compare with him in terms of phenotype and genotype. So we're super excited to offer him out into the industry, and from a British bred point of view, heterosis is probably one of the most underpinned profit drivers in any breeder at breeding position, and going into the future, we think he's going to be, well, both Robert Redford and Maddie are options moving into the future for the industry. The last bull that I'll speak on is Black Diamond Poster Boy, who is the paternal brother to the current world record holder. He's by Putnam 61Y out of the River Hill herd over in Canada there. Black Diamond went over there and picked out that female, especially and actually specifically designed these embryos to come here into Australia, and the Putnam sons have been selling extremely well. Poster Boy is a bull that has a lot of carcass about him. He's full of red meat. He's very, very strong topped, big hip on him, a lot of carcass merit, as I said. So yeah, we will have more size come out in the future, but just keep an eye out on our social medias, and we'll keep you up to date. So that's all from me. If you have any questions from about the bulls, contact myself, Bill, Kim, or Fletch, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. I'll just hand over to Bill to finish out tonight's meeting.
Well, thank you, everybody. We've run a little bit over time, but you know that can happen from time to time. A really special thanks to Cliff and to Matt for their presentations, and also to the rest of the team for the time and effort they've put into it. Big thank you to all of you for staying around and listening to us. Tomorrow you'll be receiving an email which will have a survey, and we'd really appreciate if you could give us some feedback on this being our first webinar, and some tips about maybe how we can improve it. Tomorrow evening, if you go to our website and probably on social media, we'll be having the sneak peek of our update with the new bulls and some special stories in there. Next week, the full ABS update for autumn will be online and be up on our website. And the video cast of today's presentation will also be up on the ABS website next week. So many thanks. Good evening, good morning, goodbye.